And we have with us Dr. Nisha Arunatilake, and she's going to talk about participation or access to research funding. Nisha is Director of Research at Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. Over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, Waka. As Waka said, I am the Director of Research at the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. So in my institute, once in 3 years, we come up with a research program. But it's almost always we have funds to carry out the research we have identified. We try to raise funds through projects. Usually the projects come with their own research objectives and they don't always fit in with our research agenda. We try to use own funds to conduct research that we think are very important, but often we don't have sufficient funds and we have to limit the scope of those projects because of funding limitations. Now, these are not experiences unique to IPS. These are experiences encountered by all kinds of researchers and think tanks throughout the global south. There is increasingly agreement that researchers living in developing countries are better aware of the research gaps and are better able to set research agendas that have more value to development stakeholders. Local researchers are also closely associated with the policy stakeholders, making it easier for them to communicate research findings. Now, this nexus between research to policy is not a direct line. It's a complex set of activities, and you have to act in a lot of different ways and in the long term to make research, use research to influence policy. Now, that can be done by somebody who is already in a country, in the locality where policy changes need to happen. A lot of these outside researchers who come by for short duration of time, even if they produce good research, oftentimes they are not there to influence change using that research. But although it is important for local researchers to conduct research, the capacity of the local research to conduct research, as I mentioned earlier, is very limited. A recent PEP study assessing the participation of researchers from lower middle income countries in economic development policy debates led by Lucas Ranconi, I was also involved in that study. We found that there are 3 main reasons for poor participation of local researchers in development policy reports. This is because lack of demand by funding agencies and governments, lack of access to networks, and lack of capacity of the local researchers. These were also what was highlighted by my colleagues before me. So this is like a vicious cycle. There is low funding, which limits the access to resources and training, which limits the capacity of local researchers, which affects the quality of the research, so they are not invited to networks, and then there is no demand for work done by local researchers. So what we want to do in this call to action is change that research cycle by increasing funding for development research led by local researchers. This can include funding for training, funding for mentoring and scientific workshops, but also for research fellowships that can help to foster and protect the research time of young, talented scholars residing in developing countries. We think that such kind of funding can create better quality research and better involvement of local researchers in development discussions and produce better skilled researchers and more vibrant research cultures in developing countries, better engagement of researchers in public debates, and key policy issues, and greater involvement of local researchers in research agenda setting that address the key concerns of the societies where they live in, which could also help reduce development disparities. Now, there is evidence from 2009 to 2018. Waka also mentioned that because he was also part of the think tank initiative, and Institute of Policy Studies was also part of this initiative. There was an experiment where a lot of funders got together. It was managed by ITRC, and they provided co-funding to 43 think tanks in 20 different countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America over 10 years. One key learning from this initiative was that having access to co-funding enabled think tanks to develop their own research agendas, which were able to generate public debates in their societies and influence positive policy changes. Now, a book by the South Asian think tanks who benefited from this think tank initiative. There's a book called Strengthening Policy Research, Role of Think Tank Initiative in South Asia. It's edited by Thorat, Dixitma, and Burma, but all the resource persons from different think tanks contributed to this book. It very clearly explains that the crucial role played by long-term core support in strengthening think tanks for more rigorous research quality and for better influence, better capacity for researchers to influence public policy. And more importantly, it also shows how different think tanks take different and complex ways to influence policies in their respective domains, something which is very difficult for somebody who is coming from outside for short periods of time to do. So this book recommends the need to strengthen think tanks and local researchers for facilitating evidence-informed and effective public policy making, which is also what we are calling for. Thank you.